My name is Olivia Hayes, and for the longest time I believed that 10 years of marriage meant security, safety, trust. But one single evening tore those beliefs apart. It was our anniversary, 10 years to the very day since Nathan Cole and I had stood beneath a canopy of twinkling garden lights and promised each other forever. To celebrate, Nathan had chosen the Crescent, the tallest, most exclusive restaurant in the city. The kind of place where people don't just eat, they display success like it's a performance. The chandeliers glimmered above us like a constellation, while the city skyline stretched across the floor-to-ceiling windows like a painted backdrop. I had chosen a navy silk dress that night, simple, elegant, hugging just enough to remind him, and maybe myself, that I still cared. Nathan, as always, looked perfectly polished, crisp black suit, dark tie, and that faint trace of cedarwood cologne I used to find comforting. He smiled as I sat across from him, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Happy anniversary. Live," he said, raising his glass of Cabernet. "To us," I replied, letting my glass meet his with a delicate chime. Even then, a tremor of unease stirred inside me. It was subtle, a shift in the air between us. His voice carried that smooth, practiced ease, but under it was a tightness, like a violin string stretched one turn too far. He glanced at his phone more than at me, fingers drumming lightly against the table as I tried to ask about his day. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe I was overthinking. But deep down I knew the truth. Something had been wrong for months. Late-night calls he brushed off as urgent clients. Weekend meetings that appeared at the last minute. A coolness in his touch that hadn't always been there. I used to know a Nathan who once stayed awake until sunrise, helping me perfect my very first pitch deck. That man, the man I thought I married, had been fading away piece by piece. And so that night, even with the skyline glowing like perfection itself behind him, I had never felt lonelier in our 10 years together. I didn't yet know what Nathan had planned. Didn't know that the night would end in a hospital, or that a single glass of wine would change both our lives forever, but I knew something wasn't right, and I was right. Looking back, the signs had been there. They were never loud. They crept in quietly, the kind of things you can dismiss or excuse if you want to keep believing in love. We had always been what people called a power couple. Nathan ran his investment firm. All shiny offices and designer suits. I had built my consulting agency from scratch. To the outside world, we looked unstoppable. Perfect even. But perfection is a costume. And costumes slip. Over the past year, Nathan had grown distracted, distant. At first it was small things, missed calls, vague explanations for why he was late. I convinced myself it was pressure. Big clients, high stakes, deadlines. After all, I knew that world too well. But the unease grew. At dinner, he barely touched his food, eyes glued to his phone like it held secrets too dangerous to share. When I asked how his day had gone, his answers were short, clipped. "Same old," he'd mutter, shrugging. "You know how it is." But I didn't. Not really. The intimacy we once had, those long late-night conversations, those impulsive weekend getaways, those small rituals like cooking dinner together on Sundays, had evaporated. In their place sat silence, or worse, politeness. One night, I asked if something was wrong. He glanced up from his laptop, gave me a hollow smile, and said, "No, babe. Just tired." But his eyes betrayed him. He wasn't tired. He was absent, elsewhere. And a few weeks before our anniversary, I found proof. It was late. He had left his gym bag by the closet. Something about the way it sagged on the floor felt off, I don't know why I looked, but I did. Inside, under a towel, I found a second phone. It wasn't locked. But it was empty. No contacts. No messages. Just a clean home screen. I wanted so badly to believe it meant nothing. That maybe Nathan was just trying to separate business from personal life. That maybe it wasn't even his phone. But my gut screamed otherwise. That night, as I lay beside him staring up at the ceiling, I realized just how far apart we had drifted. Two people under the same roof living entirely different stories. And still, I stayed. I didn't demand answers. I clung to the belief that we could weather it, that this was just a rough patch. But sometimes what we call a rough patch is really the beginning of an ending. By the time we reached our anniversary dinner at the Crescent, my hope had already been fraying. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself, pretending I needed to freshen up. In truth, I just needed to breathe. The tension at that table had become unbearable, like staring at a mask I once loved, but no longer recognized. The hallway outside the dining room was quiet. Dim lights spilled over polished marble floors. A soft jazz tune hummed overhead, almost mocking me with its calmness. I leaned against the wall, closed my eyes, and tried to steady my breath. My heart raced, though I couldn't explain why. That was when I heard someone say my name. Not ma'am, not excuse me. My actual name. Mrs. Hayes? I turned. It was the waitress who had been serving us all evening. Barely 20. Dark hair neatly braided. Her name tag read, Sarah. But her face looked different now. Tense. Urgent. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she whispered, glancing around. "But I need to tell you something." I blinked, unsettled. "What is it?" Her voice dropped lower. I saw your husband put something in your wine." Sarah's words struck me like a physical blow. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My mind scrambled for excuses, for some innocent interpretation. Maybe Nathan had stirred sugar into the glass, or maybe she had mistaken him for another man. But Sarah's eyes, wide, unwavering, left no room for doubt. "I'm sure," she whispered. I saw it dissolve. It wasn't normal, and the way he looked around, so careful, it didn't feel right. If it were me, I'd want someone to tell me. Her urgency lodged itself deep inside me. The hallway seemed to shrink, the polished marble pressing in. My breath caught in my chest, as though the air itself had thickened. Sarah glanced nervously toward the dining room doors. "I need to go, please. Be careful." And just like that, she slipped away, back into the dim glow of chandeliers and candlelight. I stood frozen. One hand gripped the edge of the sink counter. The other clutched my clutch bag as though it could tether me to reality. Poison? My husband? No, my Nathan. Planning to poison me? It sounded impossible, ridiculous, unthinkable. Yet beneath the disbelief, a darker truth pulsed. Because deep down, I had known something was wrong. For months I had known, and here was confirmation, delivered not by my paranoia, but by a trembling 20-year-old waitress who had nothing to gain by lying. I forced myself to the mirror. The woman staring back wore the same navy dress, but her eyes had changed. They were wide, sharp with fear and with something else. Clarity. I had a choice. If Sarah was wrong, I would look foolish, paranoid, even cruel. But if she was right, then drinking from that glass would mean the end of me. I straightened my dress, smoothed away the wrinkles, and stepped back into the hallway. The dining room's hum returned, louder than before. Every laugh, every clink of glass, every flicker of candlelight, it all rang false now. The air itself felt heavier, The beauty of the place curdled into menace. Nathan barely looked up when I returned. His phone lay face down beside his plate. "Everything okay?" he asked, slipping the device away with casual ease. "Yeah," I said lightly. "Just needed a moment." He studied me for a second too long. Then he smiled, though it didn't touch his eyes. "You sure? You look pale. Headache. Nothing serious." I slid into my chair, forcing a laugh as though I were still in the mood for celebration. My gaze drifted to the 2 glasses of Cabernet. Mine sat on the right. His untouched glass waited on the left. Somewhere inside one of them, a lie lingered. I made my move casually, hiding it behind a stretch and a soft chuckle. "This wine's too good to waste," I joked, and with one smooth motion, I nudged his glass toward myself and slid mine over to him. He didn't notice. His eyes had already dropped back to his phone, fingers tapping something urgent. I lifted his glass, my new glass, and took a small sip. The flavor was rich, slightly dry, familiar, but on my tongue, it burned bitter with dread. "To 10 more years," I said, raising the glass, meeting his eyes. For the briefest flicker, surprise crossed his face. Then he smiled, thin and careful, raising my glass in return. "To 10 more," he echoed. He drank deeply, the red wine disappearing down his throat. My own glass, really his, sat half full in my hand. A silence settled, heavier than before. I kept my smile fixed even as panic churned beneath it. Had I just made a terrible mistake? Had I tested a fear that wasn't real? Or had I placed Nathan on a collision course with his own betrayal? I didn't know yet. But I knew one thing with certainty. I had stopped being passive. I was no longer waiting for something to happen to me. I was watching, listening, preparing. At first, nothing happened. Nathan leaned back in his chair, casually dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. He looked relaxed, too relaxed. Not the ease of comfort, but the arrogance of control. I twirled my fork against my plate, forcing my trembling fingers to stay hidden beneath the table. Every movement of his, every blink, every breath, every glance at his watch, became evidence to me. "So," I said, keeping my tone light. "How's that big deal going? The one that's been keeping you up every night?" His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Complicated. Big stakes. High risk. You know how it is." I nodded, slow and deliberate. "Sure, but you've always liked high-stakes games, haven't you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for his water, took a measured sip, then set the glass down. His gaze flickered briefly toward my glass, his original one, before sliding back to me. "You're not drinking much," he said, voice casual. "Saving it," I replied with a sweet smile. "This one deserves to be savored." His fingers tapped against the table. Faster than slower, then they stilled. Seconds passed. And then he coughed. Just once, dry, quick. Then again. And again. My heart thudded violently as he pressed a hand to his forehead. "You okay?" I asked, my voice steady though a storm raged inside me. "Yeah," he muttered. Just tired, but he didn't look tired. His face had lost its color. A thin sheen of sweat clung to his hairline. His eyes blinked too fast, unfocused. His hand trembled as he reached for his glass, my glass, the poisoned one. But he missed. The stem toppled, red wine spilling across the tablecloth like dark blood soaking into white linen. "Nathan!" I pushed my chair back sharply. The screech of wood against marble silenced nearby conversations. He groaned, slumping forward, his body folding as though invisible strings had been cut. Gasps rose around us. A waiter dropped a tray with a crash. The dining room froze, dozens of eyes on us. "Call 911. I shouted. From the corner of my vision, Sarah appeared again, her face pale as chalk. She looked at Nathan, then at me, horror in her eyes. The man slumped at the table, the man I had trusted for 10 years, wasn't just unwell. He was unraveling, and I knew without a shred of doubt that the glass meant for me had betrayed him instead. His plan had failed, and I had survived. The ambulance. Lights painted the marble. Entrance in pulses of red and white. People watched, whispered. Someone touched my elbow and asked if I was okay. I nodded, though I couldn't feel my face. They lifted Nathan onto a gurney. His tie hung crooked. His eyes were half open, unfocused, blinking hard like he could force his body back into compliance. He tried to speak, but the sound came out as a low scrape, like a word dragged across gravel. "Ma'am, are you riding with him?" A paramedic asked. "Yes," I said. The word sounded like it belonged to someone else. Inside the ambulance, everything was bright, clinical, too close. A monitor blipped in steady, merciless rhythm. The paramedic pressed a cuff to Nathan's arm, then glanced at the IV bag like it was a clock ticking down. "What did he take?" The paramedic asked. I don't know." My voice fractured, then steadied. I drank his..." We switched glasses. The paramedic's eyes flicked to mine. Not judgment, calculation. "Okay, good to know." I stared at Nathan's hand. The same hand that used to trace idle patterns on my wrist while we watched old movies on Sundays. Now it twitched. Small, sharp, like the body was arguing with itself. The doors swung open. We slid into the hard fluorescence of the emergency bay. Nurses moved in a practiced orbit. A doctor called for labs. A curtain whisked on its metal track and swallowed Nathan whole. I was left with a plastic chair and the wine on my dress. The emergency room didn't feel cold. It felt emptied out, like sound had been scooped from the air and locked somewhere I couldn't reach. The TV on the wall murmured about sports, then weather. A vending machine hummed. An orderly laughed softly with a nurse in a corner. Life continued, indifferent. I pressed my palms together to stop the shaking, but it only moved the tremor up into my shoulders. I tried to call no one. I tried to breathe. He meant it for me. The thought returned in waves. He meant it for me. A door opened. A doctor in a white coat scanned the room. "Mrs. Hayes?" I stood. My knees sagged and then remembered themselves. "Yes." "I'm Dr. Patel." She guided me to a quieter corner near a bulletin board, covered in cheerful reminders that felt cruel right now. "Get your flu shot. Hydrate, be kind." "Your husband is stable," she said, voice even, steady, like a metronome. "We've sedated him to control his breathing and blood pressure." He ingested a high dose of a controlled sedative, diazepam, or a close analog. Not over the counter, concentrated, potentially lethal without intervention. The word lethal landed like a metal bead. Small, heavy, final. I swallowed. "I think that dose was intended for me." Her eyebrows rose a millimeter. Not shock. Permission for me to continue. "A waitress warned me," I said. She saw him put something in my wine. When I got back to the table, I switched our glasses. Dr. Patel nodded once, slow. That would align with his presentation. Rapid onset. CNS depression. We're monitoring him closely. Right now, he's responding to treatment. The relief that moved through me was sharp, then dull. Relief felt wrong. Relief was what you felt for someone you trusted. Dr. Patel watched me for a moment, assessing a different kind of vital sign. "We're required to involve law enforcement in cases like this," she said gently. "This isn't only medical. I understand. Do you feel safe going home tonight?" The question surprised me. It shouldn't have? I don't know, I said. She nodded, as if that was a valid answer. We can have a social worker speak with you. There's also a private space you can use to make calls. Thank you, I said. My voice was steady again. I didn't know if that was strength or shock pretending to be strength. Dr. Patel touched the file against her chest like a small shield. You did the right thing. The right thing. I wanted that to be enough. It wasn't. Time shifted strangely after that. Thick in some places, thin in others. A nurse asked if I wanted water. I said yes and didn't drink it. A security guard spoke softly into a radio, eyes on the doors. I stared at a poster with a cartoon heart and tried to recognize mine. I replayed the dinner. The glass. The cough. The way Nathan's fingers drummed, then stopped. If I listened closely, I could still hear the stemware hit the linen. The sound had been delicate, intimate, like porcelain breaking under a whisper. A police officer arrived. Detective Morales, plain clothes, quiet shoes. He asked if I wanted to sit. I was already sitting. Mrs. Hayes, I'm sorry you're going through this, he began. I need to ask a few questions while details are fresh. Is that okay? Yes. He took out a small notebook that made no sound when it opened. You said a waitress warned you? Yes. Sarah, young, dark hair, braid, name tag. What exactly did she say? She saw him, Nathan, drop something into my wine. She said it dissolved quickly. She said the way he did it didn't feel right. Then she left. She looked scared. Did you drink from that glass? I switched them. He drank it. Morales nodded, absorbed. Do you know of anyone who might want to harm you? Anyone besides your husband? The list is short, I said. The attempt at humor died before it left my mouth. No, not like this. Has your husband ever threatened you? His tone was neutral. Not fishing. Cataloging. No, I said, then paused. Not with words. Lanes opened between us, wide and specific. Can you explain? He asked. Distance, I said. Secrecy. A second phone. Missing weekends. Answers that didn't answer anything. He wrote a few words. Do you know what your husband does for a living? He runs an investment firm. I let the sentence sit. It sounded clean. It wasn't. Any financial pressure lately? Business trouble? Morales asked, as if throwing a pebble to see how deep the water went. I don't know, I said truthfully. But I've had reasons to wonder. He watched me, not unkind. We'll secure the restaurant footage and interview the staff, including the waitress. We'll also request a toxicology screen for your husband. We'll handle the chain of custody for the glasses if they were preserved. I thought of the tablecloth swallowing the spill, the white turning dark, then darker. I don't know if the glasses were saved, I said. It happened fast. We'll still pull the cameras, he said. The Crescent has a reputation for discretion, but they're cooperative when the law shows up. I nodded. The motion felt borrowed. Is there somewhere safe you can stay tonight? Morales asked. Family. A friend. I pictured our house, the framed photos from trips, the neatness of our shared office, his watch on the dresser, the gym bag, the phone with no messages, no history, no past. I pictured myself there. I couldn't. Not tonight. I'll get a hotel, I said. Somewhere nearby. If you'd like, we can arrange an escort while you collect essentials, Morales offered. I almost said no. Then I remembered the brazen, simple act of a hand moving over a glass. Yes, I said. Please. He nodded, closed the notebook without a snap, and gave me a card. I'll be in touch. If you think of anything at all, call me. I slipped the card into my clutch like it might burn if I held it too long. Hours folded and refolded. A nurse led me down a corridor where curtains made small rooms out of air. We stopped at Nathan's. He lay still, the sedation smoothing every edge of his face until he looked young again. The machine traced quiet peaks and valleys in light green. A clear line snaked into his arm. The tie was gone. The shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow, revealing the scar he got in college when he fell off a bike and laughed it off for a week before admitting he needed stitches. My hand found the cold railing of the bed and stayed there. "Hi," I said, though he couldn't hear me. Or maybe he could. The idea felt both ridiculous and necessary. "It's Olivia." The name felt like an anchor thrown into dark water. I thought of the vows under the garden lights, the way he had looked at me then, open, certain. The version of us that lived there had been honest, or at least it had believed it was. "I don't know why," I whispered. Not yet. The monitor kept its rhythm. Somewhere a nurse laughed. Somewhere else a baby cried. Life braided itself through the building and did not ask permission. "I want to be the woman who forgives," I said softly. "But I can't forgive what I don't understand. And I can't pretend this didn't happen." My eyes burned, but tears didn't fall. They hovered, indecisive. "Like me." I switched the glasses, I said. The words were steady, factual. "I'm still here," silence answered. It felt like a verdict and a reprieve. I stepped back. A nurse checked a drip, charted numbers, nodded politely. I nodded back like we'd agreed on something. Outside, the waiting room had thinned. The TV tried a new story about a concert. The vending machine hummed the same low note. Dr. Patel found me again. "He'll be in observation overnight," she said. "Possibly longer, depending on how his labs trend. We'll keep him sedated until we're confident his respiratory function is stable without assistance." "Can I leave my number?" I asked. "If there's a change?" "Of course." She wrote it down, neat and small. "And please, consider that social worker, even if just for resources." "I will," I said. I meant it. If not tonight, then soon. I wasn't sure what resources I needed. A list felt like a place to start. I stood. My legs agreed to be mine again. The nurse returned my jacket in a clear plastic bag. The navy silk under it had dried in stiff, dark blooms. I pressed the bag to my ribs like a shield and walked out into the shadowed parking lot. The air was cool, honest, almost kind. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Detective Morales. I'll meet you at your house in 20. East entrance. We'll keep it brief." I typed back, "Thank you," and watched the word glow on the screen for a second before it vanished into the dark. The city at 2 a.m. is a different animal. Quieter. More truthful. Streetlights made long, clean paths out of places I had only seen in daylight. I drove the route home I could have taken blind, but tonight it felt unfamiliar. Like the map had shifted, and I didn't know the new names for old turns. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the window. The navy dress. The hair I had pinned carefully hours earlier. A face I recognized and didn't. "Trust yourself," I thought. The words came from the bathroom mirror. From Sarah's whisper. From the split second where my hand slid one glass for another. Trust yourself. My house appeared. Same silhouette. Same windows. Same hydrangeas a neighbor insisted would be happier with more shade. Everything looked intact. Ordinary. If houses could keep secrets, ours knew how. 2 unmarked cars idled at the curb. Detective Morales stepped out, lifted a hand. Another officer joined us. We spoke softly on the porch, like the house might wake. "We'll walk through with you," Morales said. "In and out. Essentials only." The lock turned easily under my key. We stepped into lemon cleaner and quiet. The living room was as we left it that morning. A book open face down on the coffee table, a throw blanket folded with Nathan's precise edges, an empty mug with a perfect brown ring inside. In the hallway, a picture from Capri. I wore a white dress. Nathan kissed my temple, and the camera loved us for it. I kept walking. In the bedroom, I pulled a small suitcase from the closet and filled it with clothes I didn't have to think about. Jeans, a sweater, 2 blouses, flats, running shoes. The officer opened drawers gently, eyes moving in patterns I couldn't see. "Anything specific you're looking for?" Morales asked. "Yes," I said. The answer surprised him and me. The gym bag. It sat where he had left it 2 weeks ago, obedient to its own gravity. I unzipped it and breathed in linen and metal and something like peppermint. The towel lay folded. Beneath it, space. Empty. The cold, smooth absence where a second phone had once been. "It's gone," I said. "What was here?" Morales asked. "A phone," I said. "No lock, no messages, no history. Could he have moved it?" "He hasn't been home since dinner," I said. Then I remembered the look on his face when the glass slipped. The way his hand reached and failed, unless someone else has been here. Morales nodded to the officer. "Notes traveled between them without words. We'll request your permission for a full search tomorrow," he said. "For now, take what you need." I packed toiletries with hands that had memorized these motions years ago. Moisturizer, toothbrush, the small bottle of perfume I only wore to dinners that mattered. On the way out, I paused at the doorway of our shared office. 2 desks, 2 lives, 1 reality. On mine, a plant refused to die. On his, a stack of business magazines with confident men on the cover. Under the lamp, a folder sat slightly askew, like it had been placed down in a hurry and almost straightened, then not. I didn't touch it. "Not yet. Tomorrow," Morales said, reading my thoughts. "We'll do it right," I nodded. We walked back through the house. The picture from Capri still smiled with all its teeth. Outside, the air was thinner, cleaner, the kind of air that lets you see further than you want to. "Where are you staying?" Morales asked. "The Larchmont," I said. "On Broad." "We'll follow you there," he said. "Just in case." "Thank you." He looked like a man who had seen 100 versions of tonight and still believed in the point of showing up. "Mrs. Hayes," he said softly, "you're not alone." I didn't realize I had been holding my breath until it left me. The hotel room was anonymous and merciful. Crisp sheets, a chair that had no history, a window that looked at a part of the city I'd never examined. I set the suitcase on the rack and let it yawn open. The navy dress slid into the closet like a shadow finding its home. I showered until the water turned from hot to honest. Steam erased the mirror and gave me a new one. I stood there, palms on cool porcelain, and watched the fog retreat. "Hi," I said to the woman in the glass. "It's still you." My phone lit up. A text from an unsaved number. "This is Sarah, from the Crescent. I got your number from the detective. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." I stared at the words, at the little courage it takes to press send when you don't have to. "I'm okay," I typed. "Because of you. Thank you." The dots pulsed, disappeared, returned. "If you need anything, I work lunch tomorrow. I can talk during my break. I'm sorry you had to go through that." "Me too," I wrote, "but I'm glad you spoke." I put the phone face down and stood in the middle of the room until the hum of the air conditioner became something like a lullaby. I didn't cry. Not yet. Maybe later. I climbed into a bed that didn't know our names and closed my eyes. For a moment, I was back under the garden lights, 10 years earlier. I could hear laughter, friends, the soft clink of cutlery against plates, Nathan's hand finding mine with the certainty of a new language. He had promised me forever, and I had believed him with my whole life. Now, in a hotel room where the art was glued to the wall, I promised myself something else. Not revenge. Not even justice, though I would take both if they came clean. I promised to listen to the whisper that had saved me, to the quiet that follows shock, to the voice that says you are here. Keep going. I promised to find the truth, however ugly, however simple. Because if love can be a disguise, truth is the only face that doesn't slip. I slept. The morning after the hospital, the world felt both ordinary and foreign. Cars honked in the street below my hotel window. A couple argued quietly about coffee. Somewhere, someone was late for work. And yet, everything for me had shifted. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 1 voicemail. I pressed play. Mrs. Hayes? This is Lacey Thomas. I used to be a client of your husband. I'm sorry to call you like this, but I don't know who else to tell. I think Nathan's firm is in serious trouble. Please, call me back. Her voice cracked, as if she was holding something heavier than words. I called her. She answered on the first ring. Olivia? Thank you for calling. I didn't want to say this over voicemail. Her voice shook. I trusted Nathan. He doubled my portfolio once, but now I can't reach anyone at his office. My last transfer is missing, and I heard rumors, lawsuits, creditors. I thought maybe you would know. I listened, heart thudding. No, I said softly, but I believe you. There was a pause. Are you safe? She asked, as if she knew more than she was willing to say. Yes, I lied. Later that afternoon, I returned home with Detective Morales and a second officer. They walked the perimeter, careful, methodical. Inside, the air smelled the same, but the house itself felt altered, like the walls knew a secret and were debating whether to keep it. I headed straight to the office. The folder under Nathan's lamp still waited. I pulled it closer and opened it. My breath caught. Inside were letters, banks warning of overdue accounts, creditors demanding payment. A notice from the SEC. Pages of trades gone wrong, losses stacked like dominoes. And tucked among them, a draft document. A power of attorney, unsigned but prepared. It listed me, Olivia Hayes, as the grantor, Nathan Cole as the grantee. If I were incapacitated, every asset of my company would slide quietly into his hands. I felt the blood drain from my face. My company, the business I had built from nothing, the one part of my life that was entirely mine, he had planned to take it. It wasn't just about eliminating me. It was about control, silence, ownership. I sank into the office chair. The papers spread like wreckage across the desk. I remembered him leaning over me once, years ago, when I doubted myself. You're brilliant, Liv. You'll make it. His voice had been warm then, supportive. Now I realized it had been useful to him. My success was another asset he could claim when the walls began to close in on him. The truth was worse than betrayal. It was calculation. Detective Morales stepped inside quietly. You found something? I slid the papers toward him. He scanned, jaw tightening. This lines up. Financial collapse, desperation. And if you were incapacitated, he tapped the power of attorney. He'd get everything. I nodded, the motion sharp, mechanical. Morales closed the folder carefully, as if it might shatter. We'll add this to the evidence chain. It paints motive, clear as daylight. Clear! The word rang bitter. Nothing felt clear except the ache in my chest. That night in the hotel, I sat by the window, staring at the city's restless lights. The betrayal replayed in loops, his hand sliding over the glass. His thin smile, the cough, the way he folded into himself. And underneath it all, the question that gnawed. Did he ever love me at all? I didn't have the answer, but I had something else now. Proof, paper, motive. And once you have proof, you can't unknow it. The news broke before I was ready. Headlines trickled out, first in local outlets, then spiraling wider. Investment star hospitalized after wine incident. Police investigating mysterious collapse of Nathan Cole. My name followed his in every story, though no one yet knew the full truth. Some reporters called, others left emails with subject lines that made my stomach turn. To the public, I was the wife, a silhouette in a navy dress, a name in a scandal. Behind the curtain, detectives were piecing together what I had already begun to understand. Nathan wasn't just reckless with love. He was reckless with money, reputation, everything. And when it all started to collapse, he had decided to sacrifice me to save himself. Friends reached out, tentative. Is everything okay? One text read, as if there were a polite way to ask whether your husband had tried to poison you. Others disappeared completely. Silence is easier than confrontation. I didn't blame them. People don't want to believe monsters can live behind tidy front doors, but the silence hurt in its own way. Loneliness inside noise is one thing. Loneliness inside scandal is another. Detective Morales kept me updated. His voice stayed calm, his notes meticulous. We've confirmed financial irregularities, he told me one afternoon at the precinct. Large-scale losses, risky trades, personal debts tied to the firm. It wasn't sustainable. And the documents? I asked. They build motive. We'll introduce them in court. He was cornered. He saw you as the exit strategy. The phrase hit me like glass. Exit strategy. I had been reduced to a line item in his plan. The first court hearing came quickly. I didn't go. I stayed in the hotel, sipping tea from a mug Nathan would have hated, the handle too small, the glaze imperfect. I watched the sky outside turn gray, honest, unembellished. Reporters stood outside the courthouse, their microphones stiff in the wind. Cameras followed Nathan as he entered in handcuffs, suit replaced by plain clothes. His lawyer painted him as overworked, unstable, misunderstood. But I knew better. I had lived beside him long enough to know the difference between instability and strategy. That evening, I opened my laptop. A blank document blinked back at me. I began to write. Not about revenge, not about anger, about survival, about the quiet ways danger creeps into everyday life, about how the most dangerous place for a woman isn't always a dark alley. It can be across the dinner table from the man who says he loves you. The words came jagged, then steady. They formed a shape I hadn't expected. Not confession, not therapy, declaration. Days blurred. Therapy sessions began. I learned that healing doesn't mean erasing pain. It means carrying it without letting it break you. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. For the woman who once believed navy silk and candlelight could hold a future together. I also began to speak. It started small. A women's leadership conference, then a podcast invitation. Later, a panel at a nonprofit dedicated to helping women recognize coercion. Financial, emotional, physical. I didn't tell my story for spectacle. I told it because silence is what almost killed me. I wasn't the same woman anymore. I wasn't defined by what happened at the Crescent. I was defined by what I did afterward. I rebuilt. I returned to my company stronger, sharper. I hired Sarah, the waitress whose whisper had saved me. She became my executive assistant, and I mentored her as she studied business. Watching her step forward gave me something to believe in again. People still asked if I had loved Nathan. The answer was yes, deeply. But love is not an excuse for betrayal. It is not a reason to gamble with someone's life. And no one, no matter how familiar, has the right to make you doubt your own reality. So if you're still listening, if my story resonates even a little, hear this. Trust yourself. Listen to the whispers in your gut. Don't wait for catastrophe to confirm what you already know. If you've ever escaped something that once felt unescapable, honor that survival. This is my story. But maybe, in some way, it's yours too. If this story touched you, please subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a chapter. Share this video with someone who needs the reminder to trust their instincts. And if you stand with survivors, drop a candle emoji in the comments. Together, we turn pain into power and silence into strength.